welcome to the fourth Open Campus Forum on Campus Climate. For those of you who are new, the structure has been consistent across the forums this spring, where in our opening session, we examined a kind of interrelated, interlocked, nested set of issues, and then these subsequent four forums each have a specific focus. So the second forum looked at DPS and at racial profiling on campus. The second forum, which feels like it just happened, but was before break, looked at campus centers and how those might be improved, expanded, and in some cases instituted for different student groups. Obviously today we're here to talk about faculty diversity and retention, and the final session, and there are flyers for these on your chair. I suspect in light of the recent announcement of a tuition raise might be of interest to many students, right? But specifically to think about financial aid and admissions and ways to, I think really both at the undergraduate and graduate level, begin to address pipeline problems that affect things like we'll discuss tonight with faculty hiring and retention, right? Because to really meaningfully address the status of faculty at campuses here and elsewhere, we need more students sort of moving into graduate programs from diverse backgrounds. So I think that's something we'll probably touch on tonight.
Just to give you a sense, I'm one of 11 tenured Latino faculty in Dornsife. That's it. There are only 11 tenured African American faculty. The numbers haven't changed too much. I think the Latinos have gone down by 2. The blacks have gone up by 1 or 2 since last year. And so one of the questions that I want to put forward that I think we need to address is this urgent? Is this an urgent issue? And if it's urgent, what should we do about it? Look at our numbers in the sciences. And right now I can tell you there are 3 underrepresented minority faculty in Dornsife Sciences, even though it's about 190 faculty. 1 black, 1 Latino, and 1 Native American. I know those numbers. They're all men, by the way. Okay? So maybe we need more diversity in the sciences. I would argue we do. So having more diversity in the sciences can be an initiative. It could be an initiative. It could be multiple schools that would get the provost involved to say we need this. Why? Because we need to be a leader nationally in bringing diversity in the sciences. We want to lead in this effort. We want to get more NSF funding, more funding from NIH. And this is a critical thing that keeps our proposals to the government behind when we don't have that. There's a lot of issues to discuss. I don't want to go in longer. Issues of retention, promotion, tenure, monitoring progress, growing your own. The most important issue is that I focused on hiring. We also can't lose the faculty once we get them. And we need to know if we're losing them and why we're losing them. And that's fundamentally about building a culture of inclusion among the faculty. And if we don't do that, we shouldn't be working very hard on hiring them either, because we have to have a culture of inclusion to keep them also.
I want, or rather would demand that the university would take the necessary work that it takes to not only bring more faculty of color on campus, but create an environment that facilitates for them to thrive on campus. Because if we, it's been reiterated already multiple times by Dr. Sanchez and Professor Armour about how it's not just about getting the faculty here, but making sure they can have an environment where they can thrive and actually do the work they can do here on campus, because it's very difficult trying to navigate this space as a student and also as a faculty here, because it's not just a luxury, particularly for students, to have these faculty here that represent our identities, but it's a necessity for here to simply exist on campus. So I just wanted to stress that fact that it's not something that I just want to have, it's something that I need to have in order to have a fruitful and holistic experience here on campus. So I just want to thank everyone again. That's my 2 cents, and definitely would like to contribute more to the conversation later on.
I kind of want to close out by reading a statement from a peer in the Price School, and these have been conversations we've been having in the Price School about why is faculty diversity so important to us, and what does that mean to us. So I kind of want to read her statement. It says, for me, at its most basic, not having diverse faculty at PWIs means that I have constantly had to put in the extra work of fighting against and keeping from internalizing microaggressions. It's no surprise to many people of color and first-generation students hearing this that microaggressions, the everyday verbal and nonverbal assaults on ourselves and our communities, just seem to accumulate day in and day out. when you're at a PWI. They come from other students, sometimes more explicitly than not. They come from social events that are thrown by predominantly white and wealthy student groups. We've all heard of the ghetto and the Mexican-themed parties. And they even come from people of color who are from wealthier backgrounds than their working class or first-generation counterparts. Then, as if the day-to-day social and cultural environment of a predominantly white institution weren't oppressive enough, when we don't have a diverse faculty, the microaggressions also come from the assigned texts, the resulting discussions. When a professor doesn't know how to manage the ignorant comments about poverty, immigration, crime, gangs, and even from the professor's comments, lectures themselves. I've spent the majority of my adult life in these oppressive PWI environments and have struggled to maintain a cohesive and positive sense of self. To succeed academically while keeping from alienating myself or feeling like I'm drowning in a sea of these microaggressions, I've always had to be willing to commit to taking extra emotional labor. I've had to be calm and rational and articulate when daring to say things that derail conversations, to speak up and represent, even defend my communities, to challenge classmates, professors, guests who readily generalize and stereotype people of color, working class, and other marginalized groups. That rational and articulate self is a self I have to present in most academic settings. But then there is a self that feels the pain of microaggressions deeply, and that, after 7 years of academia, is emotionally exhausted from fighting for space and representation. I'm tired of fighting to challenge myself and others on implicit bias and systemic discrimination. I'm tired of fighting to not fall into the trap of internalizing stereotypes or ideas of exceptionalism. This is the self that from age 18 through 28 has questioned over and over why the university administration claims to want diverse students, but then leaves us out to fend for ourselves and to question whether or not diversity is just a tool to raise funds for the institution. I drew this distinction between my two selves within hours of stepping on the campus in my first PWI. As the years passed, I found ways to cope with the pain, the confusion, the alienation. I found activities I enjoyed, organizations I helped to shape and lead, and I even found some faculty members who were more understanding of and more adept at meeting the needs of their diverse students. But for the most part, regardless of who the professor is, I still feel the pressure of having to be my rational and articulate self if I want to be taken seriously in the classroom, and have had to hide and protect the self that feels pain and doesn't seem to belong in the classroom space. This is an unnecessary distinction that I and many marginalized classmates have had to make because PWIs don't understand the importance of faculty diversity or even what diversity in the student body means for the academic setting. This is an unnecessary distinction that after 7 years has finally gotten me to the point where I feel that I can no longer continue to grow academically or professionally, not without first taking a long self-care and self-love break to address and overcome the pain and the associated damage it's done to my psyche and to my perception of self. So I just kind of wanted to close out by reading that statement. And in conversation with a lot of fellow students, I think it captures some of those feelings, and look forward to the rest of the conversation tonight.
On the topic of support and retention for professors, I've had some incredible adjunct professors, but a lot of them have actually left the school because they didn't feel supported by the university. Also, they were intimidated and not allowed to unionize. Well, they got like some scary emails on a website, and my this professor that I really loved learning under, he's actually in Chicago now, and he said that he was choosing not to unionize because the university was basically harassing him, and he was afraid that that would affect his, I guess, like, chances of being employed permanently, so he decided against that. Also, with adjunct professors, I know that a lot of them don't have their own office spaces, and I think that's really important too, because professors should be able to communicate and meet with their students. With adjunct professors, I remember Skype calling them and having to meet them in different locations, or like going to a cafe instead. And I think giving them these spaces and showing them that the university does support them and does support them if they decide to unionize would be very important.
I think one of the things you have to do, I was trying to advert to earlier, was you have to make it clear that diversity promotes the bottom line at a place like this, which is profound reflection, exploration, investigation, right? Clarity of analysis and thought. How does diversity, diverse voices, diverse perspectives, how do they actually make the discussions more nuanced, more, and contribute more to making students who go through this institution better at doing whatever they do once they get out and start to come to terms with a very diverse world. If you're in leadership roles, disproportionately, many of you are going to wind up in leadership roles. How are you going to lead if you don't understand all the dynamics that we're dealing with now with the inclusion, diversity, and equity? That's going to be hitting you in the face out there. If you haven't thought about it, if you haven't sorted it out, if you haven't grappled with it ahead of time, you're going to go out less prepared and less efficacious, right, in whatever you're doing. So bring it home to everyone here that you're not doing us a favor to diversify this place. Actually, that it is increasing everybody's, cultural proficiency, cultural IQ, and beyond that, this is something we talked about at the provost retreat when we were wondering about what kinds of intellectual insights come from the fact that we have out-group members in the academy, marginalized people in the academy. And one of the things I tried to point out there was, I think one of the benefits is that kind of dual consciousness that comes from being both an outsider and an insider, i.e. you have to learn how to negotiate your way through the insider's social world, that treacherous terrain. At the same time, you have this outsider's consciousness. Well, that dual consciousness can be kind of like binocular disparity, right? Where you have multiple perspectives simultaneously held that give you the possibility of depth perception that the people who are mere cyclopses, who are ensconced in their privilege and their privileged point of views, right, are seeing a much more two-dimensional world than you. So you can bring that, kind of acoustic separation that comes from your dual consciousness and binocular disparity to the academy and gain insights that aren't going to be there if you're not there. And then there was a question. I posed that question to somebody who was in the STEM field, and I said, everything I said is really true of the humanities. I mean, works great in law and all kinds of other places, social sciences, but what about STEM? And we had a little exchange, and then Provost Quick came up to me later, and he said, I think the answer to that is at a high level of paradigm creation and paradigm change, you need that same creative process. You need that same ability to see the problem differently from different perspectives. That same kind of added insight that comes from that dual consciousness can actually help with the sciences, the STEM field as well, at a certain level, And I thought about it. I went and read up on some Richard Rorty and some other folks who were saying the same thing. I said, yeah, that's really about right. So, but I think pushing it, selling it, saying, no, you aren't diluting quality, you are enhancing quality by bringing diversity and alternative voices and perspectives into the discussion.
So I want to end by echoing Moira's thanks to the students who've been doing a lot of hard work and heavy lifting on campus, and welcome you to the forum on admissions and financial aid on April 20th, and thank you for coming out tonight.